Welcome back to the Consulting Success Podcast. I'm Michael Zapersky, and today we are continuing our exploration into a force that's not just changing how businesses operate, but really how we as consultants need to think and adapt. And yes, that is AI, artificial intelligence. I'm pleased to say that we have Michel Fortin joining us again. Our last conversation on AI, I know, was valuable and helpful, insightful maybe. So we're going to pick up where we left off. We're going to explore some new ground. We're going to look at how all this applies to you as a consultant in the world of consulting. And just to reiterate a point that I think is really important, we're not suggesting that you as a consultant need to become an AI specialist. That's not the goal. But what we do believe is that every single consultant needs to get a handle on what AI is, what AI can do, how it's going to affect your work, how it's going to impact your clients and the marketplace and the landscape that they work in. So from content creation to streamlining your operations and beyond in terms of your client and the industries that you serve, today we're going to get into some really interesting areas. We're going to start by looking back at an idea from John Naisbitt when he talked about this concept of high tech, high touch, and then see how it mirrors what's actually happening today in AI. And then as technology, right, becomes more advanced, what does it actually mean for our need for genuine human connection? And then we're going to talk about how AI is shifting the goalposts for things like trust and authority, especially when it comes to the content that we create. And Michel has some thoughts on how Google's EAT, so that's EAT, that framework of expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness is evolving into what he calls EAT 2.0, which stands for empathy, authenticity, and transparency. So we're going to unpack that and what it means for consultants. And as always, we want to make this very practical. So how can you use AI to be more efficient? And how can you actually use this to be more effective in your consulting work? How do these blend together, right? These powerful tools, how can you use that in your own unique way? And how can you bring the human experience? How can you bring in and leverage AI within your area of expertise, regardless of where that is and where in the world that you are and the work that you do? So if you're looking to get a clear picture on how to navigate the AI landscape and position your consulting practice for the future, then you're in the right place. Enjoy. All right, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Consulting Success Podcast. I am very excited today to have Michel Fortin back, joining for round 2, I believe, of our podcast kind of episodes and exploration into AI. To start off, Michel, I believe John Naisbitt predicted in 1982 that social media would emerge as a response to technology adoption. And here, we're seeing kind of the exact same pattern with AI. Can you kind of walk us through what you're observing in terms of this cyclical kind of high tech, high touch phenomenon?
Sure. So when I first started out, and by the way, thank you for having me on the podcast. I really appreciate it. One of the first books I ever read when I started in marketing back in the late 80s, early 90s, it was a book that was written in the early 80s. That was 82, like you said. It was called Megatrends by John Naisbitt. And I loved it because he was a futurist and he's also talking about consumer behavior. And I was into marketing psychology and all that. That was one of the things that drove me into marketing. And one of his 10 megatrends was called high tech, high touch. And basically, it meant, or to me, it meant, because it was not exactly the way that he presented it, but I took it as the more high tech we become, the more high touch we need to be. And lo and behold, in the 90s, the internet, the commercial internet became the thing. And everybody thought, oh, everybody's going to go digital now. We're not going to need encyclopedias. We're going to use Wikipedia. Now we're going to use the internet. We're going to use all that stuff. And people thought that would destroy the social connection and all that. But lo and behold, social media exploded and grew this need for people to connect. Naisbitt saw that as such a big trend that he actually wrote an entire book on that one megatrend alone called High Tech, High Touch. And so I look at it this way. when we look at the way that John Nisbet presented it, was that the more high-tech we become, the more efficiency, the more robotic, the more automated we become, which we will inevitably always going to be. That's the way evolution in industry is. I mean, look at the Industrial Revolution to today. The more that it will parallel the craving and the desire for human authenticity, connection, and community and all that stuff. And now we are seeing that with AI. We're seeing this pendulum swinging this way where we're getting everything automated. AI is going to be taking over all of our content, all of our marketing. It's going to be taking off all of our delivery. They're even talking about robots that will be able to flip burgers and do plumbing and construction. It's crazy now. Automated vehicles, we're seeing that already. And that will then, I believe, and it is, we're showing the signs of it with a lot of marketing research, that it's going to pull the demand for more human connection, more human insights, more a desire to connect and to crave human connection in our marketing and in the world general, in our consumer behavior.
There are consultants out there landing dream clients, charging premium fees, and building the kind of business and life that you want. And here's the thing, they're not smarter or more talented than you. They've just got the right strategy. If you're tired of guessing your way through the next steps, wondering if you should raise your fees, change your marketing strategy, or find better clients, it's time to stop spinning your wheels. At Consulting Success, we've helped thousands of consultants just like you cut through the noise, get crystal clear on their goals, and build businesses that thrive. And the best part, it all starts with a free Consulting Success growth session. This is your chance to get personalized guidance on how to break through your challenges and build a business you deserve. No fluff, no gimmicks, just real strategies that work. So why not you? Why not today? Go to consultingsuccess.com/grow and book your free session now. Let's take the guesswork out of growing your consulting business. Again, visit consultingsuccess.com/grow today. Yeah, I think the way I look at that is generally across probably hundreds of years, what is scarce or what becomes more scarce, people tend to crave more of. And so whether that's gold, position as being scarce and right, people are willing to pay a lot more for it, or there's a desire for it, whether it's now with Bitcoin, this idea of scarcity, only 21 million in supply, or even recently, a few years back in terms of COVID, that COVID made in most of the world, it was harder to meet people, right? To be around others, and so therefore, the desire to be with people and that community was even greater. I remember during COVID that in the neighborhood that we used to live in before, at that time, I would get a bunch of kind of guys from the neighborhood together in the evenings, and we would sit in a circle spaced out for quote unquote, the safety and all that, having a drink and talking into the evening because we crave that interaction and the community. And so I think what you're just describing is so important, that we've all seen this trend towards more automation, whether it's with CRMs and emails and just like all these different tools. So that's in some ways people feel it's helping us maybe to be more efficient. I don't believe more efficient necessarily means more effective. Oftentimes people are doing things that make them appear or make them feel like they're more productive, but they're not necessarily more effective. But even that to the side, because we're all going to be getting more and more emails and phone calls from AI and all this kind of stuff, that I believe, I agree, that will drive the importance and place more importance on doing things in person, finding ways to connect with clients or those that you want to serve in, really human to human, because people will desire that because technology will continue to increase.
Yeah, I'm going to add to that because what you just said is brilliant. The fact that we are using more efficiency or we're having more efficiency or the opportunity to become more efficient is not an excuse for it, but it's going to allow us to be more effective. It's going to allow the things that were taking up so much of our time and opportunities with being inefficient. Now we have AI to help us become efficient. Now we have this opportunity to become much more effective with our expertise, our creative insights, our problem-solving capacity. There was an interesting report that just came out. I think it was, I can't remember if it was Apple, that they did a test. Anyways, I can't remember. It was a very big news thing that was all over the world news a couple of days ago, where they said that AI is not capable of reasoning. And what they've done is that they've given it all the top models of all the AI models in the world, and they gave it some complex problems. They went from very simple problems to all the way to more complex ones. And when it came to the more complex ones, it still had a hard time solving those because AI is mostly a memory tool. Now, of course, it's going to go to a point where it's going to become more, reasoning agents. But right now, it is giving us the opportunity to become more efficient and do a lot of this repetitious stuff that now we can become more effective in our work. Consultants, it's a boon. It's a big opportunity right now.
Let's talk about you've mentioned the Google's EAT kind of model, if you will, and your belief this is evolving to what we call EAT 2.0. So it's going from expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness to empathy, authenticity, and transparency. Can you just maybe talk a little bit about what's driving that shift? What does that mean for how we create content or any other kind of application or relevancy for consultants?
Right. Well, this is Nesbitt's megatrend in action, right? It's really about where we were before and how the way that the market corrects itself. And Google is one of the biggest search engines in the world, still is. Although ChatGPT is now the third to Google and YouTube. But what's interesting is this: in 2018. There was an explosion of content on the internet, and a lot of people were not. And back then, it was not AI; it was just algorithms and software, just churning content like crazy. And a lot of it was just, pardon the expression, but it was crap content. So Google rolled out an algorithm, a Google update that basically penalized content that was not written by an expert, it lacked expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. And the vast majority of the content that got kicked in the pants back then was medical or health related information. So that's why they called it the medic update, although it really affected anything that affected what they call your money or your life. And back then, even websites that were created by doctors lost rankings overnight because their content was not provable to be, written by an expert, and it was not authoritative and trustworthy enough. So now they decided to do things to content, like to make sure that we added the bio of the person writing, that it was actually written by a real doctor, that the actual content itself was talked about, linked from, or mentioned on other websites. So it's a piece of authority, that on the site, there was all the signals that proved it was trustworthy. Now that's when that happened, it solved a lot of issues. In fact, it was pretty good that it happened right before COVID, because a lot of health information during COVID came out that was a lot of it was just absolutely horrible. But it was a lot of those sites that were lacking those that fixed all those, regained their rankings, whatnot. But now we're seeing the same thing happen now with AI content, or content that was just beat up by AI that's not really helpful. And I believe that Nesbitt's trend, where people are seeking out human interaction, human authenticity, is that they're going to seek out content that's not written by AI, or at least that it has some human element layer on top of it. It's kind of funny. I was looking at some stats the other day. I'm subscribed to so many newsletters, and I remember back in the day, a few years ago, where one of the biggest searches on Google was your keyword and then space Reddit, because people wanted actual information, not from Google and from websites, especially websites that had probably not necessarily the right answers to their question. They actually wanted it from human beings, like conversations going on Reddit. And then later on, we've learned that Google partnered with Reddit in a $60 million partnership deal, and all that stuff. And now I just found out that one of the more common searches now is the keyword space, not AI, which is funny. Anyways, it's neither here nor there. But the point is is that now I think what we're looking at is like, now that EAT, the bases are pretty fixed now, we're now seeing a change to a different kind of EAT. That's why I call it EAT 2.0. People are not seeking it, or they are seeking expertise, but they want empathy. They want somebody who actually understands their challenges, their problems. And oftentimes that requires a human being. There's a lot of stuff that I talk about when I say there's a bit of a messiness, a beautiful messiness in that human nature, that when we write content, the way we write, the way we express our content and our expertise, that can be done in a way where people understand, like, wow, they get me, they understand me. So, for example, I remember I went to this SEO conference a couple of years ago, and somebody on stage said, "Oh, we need to start labeling our content as made with AI if we want to, kind of like thinking about the medic update." And I kind of said, no, it's complete up. Like, we need to understand that everything is going to be created by AI.
Yeah. I saw, yeah. In a newsletter actually recently, they used to, that I was receiving, a financial one, they would always put, this image was created with AI. And I noticed over the last month, that's all gone.
Yeah.
I think it's just everyone understands that AI is kind of, it's latched onto or made its way into all aspects of content and text. So finish that thought, because I want to have a follow-up question for you on this, Michel. Yeah.
Sure. So what we can do now is layer the humanness on top of AI content. We can talk about our own stories. We talk about behind the scenes. We talk about some of our vulnerabilities, or we do a lot of storytelling with our case studies. We also connect with our audience a little bit better. Sometimes we just need to add the fact that some parts of it are actually written by human beings. So, like, we have a piece of content that's AI, but if it's been reviewed, edited by, or augmented, I call it, human augmented content. It's where we're going to add that human layer. And you mentioned something at the very beginning where you talked about where people were asking you if we're teaching people to become AI consultants. Now, I look at this as a spectrum. You've got those that are completely AI. They use AI for everything. And then you got the old school consultants who are human, but human everything. And they're like that. They're Luddites. They're very technophobic, and they rather not use. I think the sweet spot is in the middle, where a consultant who can master both, who can use AI to become more efficient and to do research, to gather data, to have better presentation, better reporting, better delivery, but also have this human aspect in the process, the human expertise, the insights, the human layer that's on top, the human delivery aspect is where they're going to be the best ones. In fact, there's a recent meta study that came out, and it's escaping me, but I think it was in conjunction with McKinsey, BCG, and I believe the Deloitte, but I might be wrong. But I was told, or I found that those that can master both, that they use AI in their consultancy, are commanding like 30% more higher fees.
I mean, yeah, to me, it makes sense. And I think this is, so what I want to kind of bring us back to and get your perspective on, there's going to be people who are joining us right now and thinking, yes, I'm going to use AI, or I am using AI for research or this or that. But when it comes to content creation, I'm very much opposed to using AI in my content creation. I'm pure, and I only want it to be me. And I think for the people who have that skill set, if a strength of theirs is writing content, like they're great at writing, they're great at whatever the medium is that they're using, and they want to do that, hats off to them. That's fantastic. Like, I personally don't see anything wrong with that if that's a strength of theirs and they can be consistent with it. But what I've observed, in our work with thousands of consultants, is that for a lot of people, content creation is not, it's not natural for them, or it's a challenge for them, or they can do it, but they can't necessarily do it at the output that they'd like to. And so for them, this is where I see AI as such an amazing opportunity to help you to kind of get past writer's block, to help you to think about new ideas, to do some of the initial work for you. But the part that you're bringing up, which I think is incredibly important, is that if everyone's just doing, using AI and taking that AI output with very minimal human, intervention or human, perspectives, opinions, all inside of it, then everything becomes a commodity, and then there's no value in what everybody's creating. So that sweet spot, or I think what's incredibly important, is that you do bring that human element to it and bring your own knowledge and expertise. But I want to make this very tangible for people, Michel. So what is your recommendation, or how do you think people should be approaching this? Because if I summarize what I heard from you, it sounds like you could use AI in many different ways in the content creation process. And so maybe you do initially some research with AI to look at and identify 3 of the biggest challenges that your marketplace or industry that you serve are having. You get clear on the ideal client. You then develop an outline for an article or a report, and you can then use AI to generate a good chunk of that. But once somebody has that, how can they go forward and feel confident putting their name on the piece of content that they've created if AI has done a lot of that work? How would you tell them, okay, this is what you should be thinking about. This is how you can use AI effectively to really help you, but still make sure that your expertise is embedded inside of that and that you feel like you can call it your own and feel proud of that work?
I remember last podcast, we talked about one thing that was really important, that we don't treat AI as a tool. It's not really a tool. Well, it is, but we should treat it as a tool. We should treat it as a teammate. If a lawyer goes to court and wins a case, all the research, the court documents, past precedents, legal precedents that they had to go through and all that, do you think they did all of that themselves? Of course not. They had paralegals working on their, especially larger legal firms. And if you're a consultant and you already have a team of, you've got researchers, you've got some content creators, you've got some proof editors, you've got some fact checkers. Maybe you have people who can verify your work and come up with different angles or blind spots that you may have missed. That's where you can use AI as a teammate, so that if you do you write content, of course you can use the bare bones where you can do research, come up with different things that you want to write about, whatever. But when you do all that writing, especially let's say you're working with a client and and you have a not only a report to produce, but you want to make sure that you're covering all the bases. And you also want to make sure that all of your thought process have been challenged properly, so that you can make sure there's no blind spots, there's no gaps. And the AI is there for that reason too. And then when you want to elevate your content, you've created, it's your content, but you want to take it, like, let's say you want to add some visuals, some supporting visuals to prove your point. It is still your content. Maybe you've done research. Maybe you've done some studies and you've got spreadsheets. You're a spreadsheet person. Well, guess what? You can upload that spreadsheet to an AI and it'll spit out a nice, beautiful chart and graph, because people are visual. Now, you might be a consultant and you might be a data-driven engineer, but the people that you might be serving might be C-suites and business owners, and they're more they're more visual, bottom line focused. They care about all the spreadsheets of stuff. I'm like that too, but I love data. It's just that I like to see the data and I'm very visual. Well, guess what? You can use AI in order to augment your humanness. So again, to finalize, so you can have your stuff yourself and use AI to augment, or you can have AI do everything, and then you augment as a human being, where you add your spin, you add your insights. So it could be either or. As
that use case that you just brought up right now, I think is a really great example, because there are a lot of people who might consider themselves to be, more engineer background or science background, or somebody's more introverted, extroverted, whatever you are. But that example of somebody who might be very comfortable in the data, right, in the numbers, but not necessarily, or maybe you're working in a country where English is the main language used, but maybe English is not your first language, and so you find it historically harder to create content in English, right? You can use AI to take that data and to say, analyze and ask some great questions. Use your expertise as a consultant to ask powerful questions that turn that data into an executive summary, or turn it into a business case, or turn it into maybe even just some bullet points that really summarize the main findings of what the data is showing. And you work that into a presentation, or you work that into a piece of content, right? The list goes on and on. But I think that is a really good example, and hopefully helpful for people to start thinking about how to do some of these things if you're not already doing them.
There's a great course on LinkedIn I took called Storytelling with Data. And I loved it because I am not a data nerd, although I can see data, but I can understand it. But if I need to sell it, I need to present it, I need to put it into a report and make sure that there's buy-in from the client, for example, or C-suite or board of directors. Sometimes when you're dealing with groups of people, you can have very diverse opinions and all that. So you have the ability to use now AI to do that, where before I used to do it myself. I used to create my own charts and all, I wanted to do some more. I use a lot of analogies and metaphors so that people can grasp some of what the data is saying. Sometimes you have to do that in order for people to truly understand data, especially if you're an engineer, you're not thinking that way. Well, now you have AI at your disposal to do that for you. And that will complement very well and make you more effective, because that's exactly the point I was saying about efficiency and effectiveness.
What's one use case or way that you are using AI right now, Michel, that you think many others are not using or just don't realize it's even possible yet, that you believe is beneficial or could really be valuable for a consultant?
I kind of mentioned it earlier. Oftentimes, I thought, and pardon my language, but I thought I was the shit. I thought I knew everything, and I think that sometimes you have people who can challenge your thoughts, poke holes. I love that, because oftentimes when I do a final presentation, a final delivery, a final piece of content, and somebody comes back and say, "Hey, you missed that," like, "Oh my gosh," and I did miss, and that's great. Then I have different set of eyes on it. Well, guess what? AI is that to me. It does that for me very quick, and oftentimes you can even direct AI to challenge you to say, don't just be agreeable. Tell go deep. Challenge me, be honest, and tell me if there's anything that I'm missing, any angles that I should be covering, anything that you think that, and if I give the entire context to the AI, and then we do that, for example, in our consulting success with our master prompt, which is they understand exactly what goes on with our ideal client and some of the challenges and pain points and opportunities that they're looking for. We can have that AI can look at whatever we're working on and say, "Hey, you're missing this, or you should be talking about this, or this." This is where I use it a lot, is kind of an analysis tool, not just a research tool, but also to kind of help me become a better person, or a better head of growth.
And so I'll share one that I've been doing here with clients as well in our Clarity coaching program, and that's around using AI to develop or strengthen the business case. What I've shared with clients quite a bit recently, and this has been true, I'd say, for the last probably 6 months, maybe even 8 months, is that a lot of buyers in the market right now, the majority, I would say, are not interested in spending money or making investments into nice to haves. They're looking for things that are must have. And a lot of consultants are still kind of stuck in this mindset of a year ago or before, where people were buying nice to haves, right? They were buying features, they were buying deliverables. But today, if buyers can't clearly see or articulate what the business case is, and how they will be better off, or how the organization will be better off, they're certainly not as likely. And what people are experiencing is longer sales cycles, more hesitation. People kind of ghosting them or not getting back to them. And so, by developing a compelling business case that actually shows what the ROI will look like, doesn't matter. I know somebody might be listening, going, "Yeah, but I work in nonprofits, or I don't work with sales, or right, I'm in the more intangible side of value." It's like, no, it doesn't matter. There's always a way to identify value and then communicate that and tie it and create a compelling business case. So what we've done is been able to work with our clients to help them by answering a few questions and gain some information about their business, and then using AI again with a very well crafted kind of master prompt that we've worked hard on to get to this point. And I did a session, I think it was last week, with some clients on this, and people's minds were blown. Like, they couldn't believe the output. That they're like, "Yeah, that's exactly like who my ideal clients are, and that is the number one problem that they have." And yeah, I haven't thought about articulating my value in this way. And so now they have this business case that they can use in meetings and take people through, or in a presentation, or elements of it can go into their proposals. Or another big one that a lot of people I don't think had thought of, is you can use this business case, because the business case generally is going to be more compelling than what you've been doing before, because most people haven't articulated or haven't identified or haven't connected the work that they do to real value, or to the value that their buyers care about in today's marketplace. So the thing that I also share with people is, you need to be taking this business case and now using the AI to think about, how can you create content that relates back to that business case. So whether it's articles or whether it's social posts like LinkedIn posts, right, all of that can be coming back to the business case. Whereas for a lot of people, their social, like their LinkedIn posts or their articles, their newsletters, again, is featuring more like nice to haves, or the features, or here's like the work we do, but it's not necessarily connected to the actual outcome the clients want. So that's one thing that we've been doing. I know with clients that they really appreciated and found to be helpful. So just another example there.
Well, there's a benefit, like there's actually a kind of nice marriage between what I just talked about and what you just talked about, which is, let's say you do make a business case and then you throw it into AI and you say, can analyze this, poke holes, add some, let's expand this. And here's the thing. For example, when I wrote copy, and back in the day when there was no such thing as AI, I had to kind of think about everything that would go into what the benefits would be, and not just the primary benefits, but the secondary, tertiary benefits, the cascading benefits, the knock-on benefits. Oftentimes, and this is kind of like a positioning process. If you are an operational efficiency consultant, let's say, and you come into an organization and you can find, you can renegotiate contracts, you can find better supply chain vendors, whatever, all those things. And I'm not an efficiency consultant by any stretch of the imagination, but if you are, and you can say, hey, I can find you $30 million, that's right. That's great. That's one thing. But what are the secondary and the tertiary benefits? What can finding $30 million do for your company? It can allow you to hire extra staff. You can finally add some more, increase the machinery by adding more software or whatever. And I'm just saying is that you can do what you just said, and then you can even elevate that so that the value, your ROI that you provide has much more oomph. And this is where AI can be very, very helpful.
And that's exactly how I tend to talk with clients or groups when the challenge is posed or the question comes up of the work that I do doesn't impact revenue. I don't save people money or I don't make them more money is the initial kind of, like let's say a consultant, and we have clients like this that develop strategic plans and they work with nonprofit organizations. So they're doing strategic planning for nonprofit organizations. They say, Michael, yeah, but it's very hard for me to articulate ROI because I develop these plans with my clients, but I don't implement them. And I can't control whether they raise more funds or not. And so then I say, okay, well, that's great. That's surface level thinking. We need to go deeper, right? How likely is it that these clients will achieve their fundraising goals if they do not have a strategic plan? Oh, well, yeah, they're not gonna hit their goals. Okay. So like we can start to think, so now let's say they have a strategic plan. How much more likely do you think they are going to be to be successful in this way? If they raise more funds, I know that you can't control whether they raise more funds or not, but if they raise more funds, what does that mean for them? Oh, it means this, it means that, right? So that's really what you're talking about. It's like going deeper, right? It's not surface level. It's going deeper and deeper and deeper. And so how does all this connect to AI? Because that's what we're talking about here today. We're getting into ROI and value. But I think it all comes back because if you know what to ask, you can use AI to help you to think through this kind of stuff and to get deeper into even areas of value and then communicate them. So, Michel, before we wrap up, I wanted to bring up one more thing that's on my mind, and it's maybe a little bit philosophical, but I think to me, it's very interesting. It's what I see happening kind of with AI, a little bit about the future. And I saw a report. I can't remember who it was. It was, some big named kind of organization that put this out. But the report essentially said that data is starting to show that as people are using AI more to do the quote unquote kind of thinking or work for them, that their brains are not as active. And probably about 4 days before I saw this, I think I saw it on X or someplace like that, this report, I had posted something on LinkedIn saying, if everyone is doing this kind of like using AI to do the work for them, does that mean that people will not have the ability? And I put it back to my experience of learning Japanese, because I started studying Japanese in university. I went to Japan. I had a business there for 5 or 6 years. And I remember when I learned kanji, which is essentially the Chinese characters used in Japanese language, I learned hundreds of those characters, and I did it by like writing it over and over and over and over again, right? Pen and paper and all that kind of stuff. And then when the computers came around, I stopped having to write. Like I would text, send Japanese characters through my phone or through the keyboard. And I have forgotten how to write many of these characters. I can still read them, but if you give me a pen and say, write it, I would have a hard time. And my thinking is, okay, well, how does this mean something similar is coming for AI, where if we're asking AI to do all this stuff for us, does that mean that we will lose the ability, or it'll be much harder for us to do those things? This report seemed to kind of substantiate or support that, saying there is some danger in that happening. But I don't know. What's your take on this?
Ah,
The big, I mean, how do you view this?
I am very much a person who believes that when we become more, and it comes back to the very thing that we started this entire conversation with. If we become more efficient, it takes away all the stuff that it liberates us to become more effective. I have conversations with my wife sometimes. I use my GPS on my phone, and she's very much give me a map. I want a physical map, and sometimes we have conversations about, well, if we go to, because she's Portuguese and we go to Portugal, she goes, what happens if your GPS doesn't work? Or what happens if the internet goes down? I get that. But, when they started allowing calculators in exams in math classes, it allowed them to solve more deeper, difficult questions, do more problem solving, more creative problem solving. It allowed the brain to work more in other areas, because a lot of the redundant, the repetitive, the heavy lifting is done by, like, AI in this case, but like, let's say calculators or tools or software or computers, that it allowed you to become much more effective. So I think that these kind of studies, sometimes they're a little bit biased, and I take them with a bit of a grain of salt. But at the same time, I think it's true. But I don't think it's not necessarily a bad thing. I think that once we do find ways to become more, like, if we have all of the stuff that's been taken care of by tools and efficiency, it just makes us better at whatever we're doing, our core things, and the things that makes us human: creativity, consciousness, reasoning, all those things, expertise, the things that we do as consultant that we can become much better at, has now been, it's opening up a whole new world that was before taken over by so much in all this redundant stuff that was, that AI is helping us to do.
I don't know if you can see my screen or not right now.
Yes, I do.
So this is the post that I put up. Let's bring it up here. So it's 1 week ago at this point, right? Because I was in a meeting with a client. They had flown out to Vancouver, and we did a meeting. And that was the day that many of these sites, like Claude and others, they went down. So we were going to bring something up and do some work, and we couldn't do it. So I was like, okay, well, we can't do what we were planning to do. And that kind of got me thinking. So then I thought about Japanese and all. But someone in this thread responded and made a really good comparison, which is very apt and kind of connected to what you just talked about. I was trying to find it. They said something like, think about this person, I think it was, mentioned the cash register, right? So imagine back in the day, well, there's no cash register, right? Everything was done manually. And now look at us today, right? We went from cash registers to POS systems, and now people just tap with their cards, and now people just tap with their phones. Things evolve. I think that to me is like really what I take from what you're just sharing, and it makes sense to me as I think through it. My initial kind of quote unquote, I guess my concern, or it's like, well, does that mean like we're going to stop thinking because we won't need to think anymore? But I think the point that you're making that I take well is, no, it just means that our thinking will change and our focus will change, and we won't need to do some of the things that we are doing today unless we choose to do them. But for many of us, we will maybe out of necessity still need to, or will desire, right? We'll want to do them because they will be more efficient or more effective, right? The same way as like you could go into it, you could run a store, and in that store you could just take, cash and coins and all that, or you could show up with one of those Stripe or Square card readers and be able to take more payments, because there's a lot of people that walk the streets these days that don't carry cash with them. They just have cards, or they just have their phone. So these are the kinds of, I think, adjustments that we're all going to need to make going forward. And this is why, regardless of kind of what your take is on AI, I believe it is so important. Not that you have to become an AI consultant selling AI services. I mean, that's up to everybody individually based on what their expertise is and what kind of business they want to have. But understanding the implications of AI and what it might mean for you, for your clients, for the future is really what I think excites both of us. And what we're doing at Consulting Success is to help to, I think, empower our clients so that they also are aware of what's coming. They don't need to, no one needs to become an AI consultant unless they want to. there's lots of areas in the world that need support, and clients and organizations that need support, whether it's healthcare or manufacturing or design, branding. I mean, science, like you name it. But there's implications and applications of AI in each of these. And I think that's really what we're trying to explore and help people to navigate.
Jensen, the CEO of NVIDIA, said that.
Disappointing, yeah.
Yeah, he said that as we see the rise to what he calls super AI, it's going to parallel the rise of the superhuman. And it comes back to John Nesbitt almost, to the same, in a different way, but it's kind of the same idea. And so I believe that, consultants who can harness AI and use it as a tool to have a lot of these things be more efficient will allow them to become super consultants.
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting concept. All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up here for today. Michel, thanks so much for coming on. Appreciate it.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right, everyone. Have a great day.